I want to start by saying that the 8th edition of CPDP, Reforming Data Protection Global Perspective, with more than 40 panels and workshops and well over 200 speakers, has been an impressive achievement on the record of the organizers. As usual, full of creativity, engagement, innovation, and spicy panels as the one we've just heard. The CPDP community is, I think, a real asset for the privacy professionals community. And that community is, I think, the backbone of further strengthening of data protection and further development. That's my point one. This point on the program is introduced as concluding notes. In fact, EDPS concluding notes are now in their 7th edition. That's a nice tradition created by the organizers, which I have accepted and helped continue. Last year, I mentioned that it was going to be my final contribution, and here I am once again. To be sure, today is the 8th day after the end of my mandate. And this is I'm due to stay in office with my colleague Giovanni Buttarelli until successors have been appointed. That may take a few more weeks, possibly months, but let me assure you, it will be only for a reasonable term. Therefore, I'm saying it loud and clear, the organizers should be aware and prepare for change. Now, these concluding notes are not providing conclusions of the conference, by far. I only want to make a few comments on key themes, and therefore I want to take inspiration from the title of the conference itself, Reforming Data Protection Global Perspective. So first then on data protection reform. It's fair to say that there is great consensus about the need for review and about the main lines, and that applies to all engaged. That is the need for stronger and more effective protection in practice, the need for more consistency, and also a need for a wider scope. That it's not been delivered yet is due to some remaining issues, but I strongly believe that change and outcome of this reform is unavoidable, and review is far from dead, although some commentators would wish it were dead. But it's not. I'm sure it will deliver, and it will not deliver too long from now. And there are two main issues which I want to mention. The first is the issue of horizontal scope of the regulation, including both private and public sector. And I believe that a narrow scope is not achievable. It will fail also in practice. It will not work. Thinking about how to split this up will show that this is a dead alley. And on the other hand, the solution for a comprehensive scope is truly within reach. It's on the table. So as to this issue, mainly in Council, it takes the willingness to deliver a solution at European level which is consistent. And as to the other issue that I know of, the one-stop shop and proximity for citizens, the proximity is the word being used, let's not overstate the problem. Once again, I think the solution is available. The lead authority is important, but it should not be exclusive. It should be part of cooperation. And proximity can be ensured in acceptable ways on a similar basis. So once again, if there is a willingness to deliver a solution at European level, it can be done. But all should prepare for gradual implementation in practice, and as part of this, the 29 group is already developing into a European Data Protection Board, and many of those issues will in fact go from here to there within a reasonable time. The adoption may be an event, but reform is continuity. That is a process which goes step by step. The second issue which is obvious within this program, in fact was discussed just now, is mass surveillance. And I believe that's the single biggest issue of 2013 and beyond. But we should not make a mistake by thinking that this is only about the NSA and similar bodies, their counterparts in Europe and elsewhere. But increasingly, it is a key feature of our entire digital environment, continuous mass surveillance. So that problem should be addressed at different levels with a long-term vision where we need to ensure progress. Too much surveillance is currently embedded in our entire digital environment. So in that wider perspective, I welcome President Obama's speech as the first steps on a journey. I also welcome the more recent report of the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board as a very welcome further step, and I see more in terms of implementation and delivering these positive signals in practice. And I'm looking forward to adequate follow-up of this, both at EU and at member states level in the European Union. It was just discussed. We've seen a policy framework presented by the Commission some months ago about restoring trust and further action to be followed. In fact, a work program for entire 2014. And I briefly mentioned that we're waiting for an interesting judgment of the Court of Justice in the data retention case, probably a few months from now, which no doubt will shed light of some of the criteria which are relevant, in addition to those who were just mentioned. And also the need for data protection reform to address the current flaws in our digital environment, in a digital ecosystem, continue to be essential, as this entire mix. And in addition to all that, I want to mention that we also need greater awareness of the developers community, those who are doing the development on the internet and all the connected infrastructure. We are currently thinking with other European institutions and national colleagues about a meaningful initiative to make progress on that front as well. And the third, and mentioned in the title of this conference, global perspectives. And there I want to be brief and say that there is more consensus on main lines than most of you, and certainly most of them out there, all those people who are not so following this in detail, would think there is. And the OECD guidelines, after their review in June, July last year, witness the degree of consensus about what the main line should be. The details of delivering this in practice differ. But the challenge is to act intelligently to capitalize on this consensus. And I think that if we do this in the European review, that framework is likely to have a global impact as a leading standard and as a very intelligent contribution. And I want to close with a few personal comments about more personal matters. That is still relevant for the conference, that is. As this is truly my last concluding notes, I want to say that it's been a privilege for me to be involved in this data protection community, from the origins through the various phases of thinking until well into the review of the EU framework. And this involved thinking about substance, about principles and rights and obligations, and gradually more and more about the instruments of delivering this and making it work in practice, and gradually very much also about how to make it more effective in practice. And all this continues to be relevant, and it should not be separated. So I think we should continue to invest in solid analysis on the substance, on the concepts, on the principles, also on how to make this all effective in practice. And in view of globalization and technological change, there is more creativity needed and more innovation, and a conference like this one plays a key role in doing so. These 10 years in EDPS, which I'm about to close, in any case, with this two-member body and a great staff, was a fantastic experience. It's been described in some law review articles, and those of you interested in details can find an interesting article in the Common Market Law Review 7 years ago about how EDPS worked internally. But thanks to these great colleagues and great staff members, and thanks to the support of the stakeholders, Commission, Parliament and Council, I think we've been doing a good job. Finally, on the role of this institution, when we started 10 years ago, there was barely anything. In fact, only a regulation, and there was not even a budget to allow anyone to breathe, let alone act. Since then, we've come a long way. I'm not sure whether Charles Rapin is in the audience. Charles, I want to mention your name because Colin Bennett and you wrote a fantastic book, The Governance of Privacy, and I believe in the original edition 2003, and it's been revised since, where you set out the various roles DPAs could play. And maybe you did not even say these only, but you said ombudsman, auditor, consultant, educator, policy advisor, negotiator, enforcer. Agents of change also. Well, when we started, we looked at the existing rules and decided that there was going to be supervision, consultation, and cooperation. In addition to that, there was a role in relation to the Court of Justice, and gradually we are doing also more of technological assessment and monitoring technological development. That has been described in books of colleagues of you, and it was striking that particularly US observers were seeing what was happening. And one of them was Abe Newman, in his book Protectors of Privacy, described what the active data protection authority should look like, 2008. We have developed this into a strategy last year. It's on our website, where which we prepared in a collaborative approach, and it also builds on good cooperation. But we emphasize some of the core values, like impartiality, integrity, transparency, and pragmatism. Some of the guiding principles, and this document ends with some key performance indicators. And in our next annual report, we will be accountable on to what extent these key performance indicators have applied in 2013. I want to close with referring to an important case before the Court of Justice, a judgment rather, in the case Commission versus Germany, 9 March 2010. That is not only the leading case for what complete independence means. Simply put, it means complete independence, and the court explains what it takes. But it's also the leading case where the court explains why a DPA should be completely independent. As a data protection authority is not the one delivering data protection, that is controller, that is also persons concerned when they exercise their rights, but they are the guardian of data protection and an essential element of the safeguards. But this independence is to make them more effective in practice, not make them feel important, far from, but effectiveness in practice because they need to act to ensure a fair balance. And that means, for me, not going to the extreme, certainly not every time, but navigating and ensuring a fair balance and that overall the safeguards work. Well, finally, there is still enough to be done. I could give you a long list, but that would be presumptuous. And I stop here, and I thank you for your presence and your support through the years. Thank you very much.